I've often wondered if I've been too harsh on politicians, judging them for their divisive politics. I'm Ian Panda, and today we are going to look at the insidious nature of our hate for Muslims, what feeds it, and what we can do about it. Back in 2016, I was on a road trip with this gentleman in Madhya Pradesh. He was a former high level executive of a smaller brand who was now working for the distributor that the brand I was working for was doing business with. Since I wasn't a local to MP, the distributor had asked me to accompany this gentleman to meet our business partners across the state. He was a pretty friendly guy. I had a great impression of him until the conversation veered to Muslims. Then things just got weird. I couldn't believe that a decent guy like that could harbor such hateful opinions about a whole community. He ranted on about how Muslims lived in ghettos, became criminals, and didn't do anything worthwhile with their lives. I had the counter argument right there on my lips. Muslims live in ghettos because they are not easily rented out apartments in Hindu neighborhoods. Even well to do Muslims struggle with finding housing. And became criminals is such a generalization. I know at least 5 friends from Motijaran, the Muslim neighborhood in my hometown, who are well educated and well placed. How can you pass a sweeping judgment like that? I had the argument right there, but I didn't say it. I avoided confrontation. This hate, or rather disgust for Muslims, was nothing new. I had encountered it before. Before I moved to Indore in 2016, I lived in Hyderabad for a year. When I first got transferred to Hyderabad, a colleague of mine by the name of Tamsil had also been transferred there to look after a different vertical. We were house hunting at the same time. Tamsilda is a very interesting man. He is a devout Muslim from Ranchi who studied Sanskrit in school and often rattles off shlokas from Upanishads and Gita to support his philosophies. While house hunting, we came across at least 2 instances of people who refused to rent to him on the basis of his religion. And there was another broker who was unaware of his religion who listed the fact that a certain society did not allow Muslim tenants as a USP for that place. Where does this hate come from? I've often wondered about this. If you look at Tamsilda and me in a single frame, you would struggle to find the difference between us. But people treat him differently once they find out that he prays to Allah and not Krishna or Ram. Why? Well, it is our conditioning. I detest the Modi administration for their divisive politics, but I can't solely blame them for the discriminations that Muslims face in our society today. They have merely exploited feelings that were always there to their advantage. The us versus them feeling. Don't get me wrong, they're definitely accountable for fanning the fire, something the earlier administrations refrained from. Anyway, as I said, the feeling was always there. And like everything else, it starts small. It never really starts with hatred. It starts with minor differentiations, minor biases that lead to disgust and then hatred. Let me give you a personal example. The very first opinion I formed of Muslims was that they were dirty. I don't know in what context it had come up, but my grandma had mentioned that Muslims stink because they don't take bath. She theorized that it was because Muslims were from Middle Eastern deserts where water is scarce, and hence instead of taking bath, they douse themselves with perfumes like ittar. Hence they smell and they are dirty. Now on one hand, she was instilling a wildly generalized idea about a whole community into the head of a small child. And on the other, she was justifying it with an explanation that while it is illogical, is kinda easy to believe since Muslims have Arabic sounding names. I don't mean to portray my grandma as a bigot. She was a kind woman, flawed but kind. In fact, even for her, this deep seated discrimination was a product of years of conditioning and not opinions developed out of lived experience. Cut to 7th grade when I joined a new school and I befriended a boy named Kasid. Now, Kasid was an active kid. He used to play a lot of sports. So he used to perspire profusely, and sweat has a stench. I would have had no opinion about Kasid being sweaty had I not heard what my grandma had once said. But since I had, I started feeling disgusted of Kasid even before I realized why. And the funny thing is that I was an equally sweaty kid. It didn't matter at this point that I had been to Qasid's house, which was like any other household. It didn't matter that probably Qasid had better personal hygiene than I had at that age. That is how conditioning works. Now, I was lucky enough to realize that I had these biases and actively correct my worldview. But most people continue living with such conditioning. Recently, in an AMA conducted on 14th February, a follower asked me this question. I'm an atheist and I suffer from hatred against Muslims. How do I fight this hatred? Now, if you notice, I advised her that she needs to decondition from all the negative stereotypes. The way to do that is to get to know Muslim people personally. In fact, this has been my standard response to such situations. Whenever an online troll spews hatred for Muslims, I ask them if they personally know any Muslims, or are they basing all of their observations on the propaganda that they consume literally every waking moment. More often than not, it is the latter. But once I remember this question backfired. This guy replied back saying he was speaking from personal experience. Apparently, his grandfather had been beaten up by a Muslim man over a property dispute. The property in question was claimed by the controversial Waqf board. For a moment, I was not sure how to react to that. But then it occurred to me that even he was not entitled to hate all Muslims, but only those who harmed his skin. You see, our neighbors in our ancestral village had illegally occupied our land. Now they were Hindu Brahmins. I didn't deem all Hindus or all Brahmins crooks because of this incident. Similarly, this guy had no right to say, "Inki jaat hi aisi hai," based off the actions of one crooked guy or a few from that community. And that's the point. All these sweeping statements that we hear about Indian Muslims, they are generalizations based off on pre-existing biases and false assumptions. For example, the whole idea that Indian Muslims should be sorry for Mughals demolishing temples. Think logically and you realize that most Muslims in India today have no relationship to the Mughal clan whatsoever. For that matter, I see propagandists cite violence in European countries by immigrants to spread hate for Muslims in India. What does a French Muslim have in common with an Indian Muslim? Nothing other than the faith. And that too, I'm sure, isn't as similar in practice as we are led to believe. We have all seen dangers of generalization in history. Just 2 decades earlier, post 9/11 in America, we saw how quickly the generalization of Arabs as brown, bearded, and turbaned led to attacks and arrests of Sikhs and innocent immigrants who are profiled based solely on their appearance. When there is a bias in place, even a small one, developed by something your parents or your friends said about certain group of people, a certain community, then it becomes really easy to believe other things about them. Biases very easily turn into disgust, and disgust turns into hatred, and hatred leads to violence. This is why such biases and generalizations should not be propagated. This is why what the TV news channels are doing in India is downright criminal. Their inflammatory coverage of topics and this ever-present narrative that paints Muslims in a negative light is clearly done at the instructions of people in power. But the hate that it creates affects everyone. Recently, the news regulating body NBDSA fined 3 new channels for violating the code of ethics in their reporting. NBDSA criticized how several news anchors have generalized ideas about Muslims to spread hate and asked them to remove these programs from their online portals. The self-regulatory body slapped a fine of rupees 1 lakh on Times Now Navbharat, rupees 50,000 on News 18 India, based on complaints filed by activist Indrajit Ghorpade against their reporting on the topic of love jihad. The NBDSA warned Aaj Tak for its coverage of violence on Ram Navami, targeting the Muslim community. In a statement, the NBDSA said that the term love jihad must be used with great introspection, as religious stereotyping amounts to violation of the code of ethics and can corrode the secular fabric of the country. They said that such reports cause irreparable harm to a community and create religious intolerance and disharmony. This us versus them mentality can't be pinpointedly blamed on one person or a group of people. The fact is that the existing differences in religion, customs, and traditions have been weaponized by several groups for their own agenda, be it the British, Savarkar's Hindu Mahasabha, or Jinnah's Muslim League. More recently, organizations like RSS and VHP have used these feelings to generate hate and ire. But the question that nobody asks is, where is this going to lead us? You see, hate makes it awfully easy to dehumanize the people we hate. When we dehumanize someone, we're able to imagine doing things to them that we wouldn't do to others. Would you ever imagine hacking your neighbor Mishraji to death? No, right? But here's what a random netizen said. Would you ever threaten Ria from your neighborhood to rape? No, right? But here's what a random citizen said to Rana Ayub for expressing dissenting opinion. Horrified yet? Even if these particular people do not act on their words and threats, there will always be criminal-minded people who will do horrendous things in the name of religion. Spreading hate makes more and more people lose their humanity and turn to violence. And that can't be good for any society. Now, if seeing all this makes any of you want to change things, if it makes you want to fight the conditioning, then let me tell you how to do it. It's very simple actually. The first step is to take the idea of religion, the concept of customs and traditions, and the definition of international borders a little less seriously. You will realize that all of these ideas are always evolving and changing. Hindu, Muslim, Christian, these are all identities which are man-made. When looking at people, you have to see humans before you color them based on their religion, culture, or nationality. See a human before you see a Muslim. See a human before you see a Pakistani, a Bangladeshi, or a Hindustani. The second step is to decondition from your existing biases. All these seemingly innocuous stereotypes about Muslims or any group of people that you believe in that makes you hate them, recognize it as conditioning. You have to stop believing in these ideas. You have to go out and meet real people and form your opinions based solely on your personal experiences. And again, use step one while judging people. The next step is to recognize and question propaganda. The world runs on propaganda. Most of what you're shown on TV or social media is designed to influence your opinion for someone's gain. The moment a piece of news or information enrages you, ask a simple question. Who profits from your rage? The news channels often peddle hate, and this hate often leads to communal riots. Who stands to benefit from a communal riot? Not the people rioting. No, they're losing lives, property, and their humanity. It is the people who stand to win votes from a polarized public. When you're consumed with hate and anger for Muslims, the politicians will use your anger to stay in power. Because all you would want them to do is make life difficult for Muslims. Whereas what you really need from them is to make life easier for you. You know, by creating jobs, providing good public facilities. By the way, there is this trend to label people like me, people speaking against hate, as propagandists. Anyone promoting harmony and peace can't be doing propaganda. Understand this. The last step after you have successfully done all these things is to continue doing it. Keep fighting the conditioning, keep fighting the propaganda. Open your eyes to real people around you. See them for who they are, some good, some flawed, but all of them human, like any of us. Life is too short to hate anybody. Rise above the hate.